We talk about what's going on in our county, like what are our local elected officials doing, what's happening at our school boards, what's happening down the street, things that you need to know about. And it covers a bunch of topics that Children's Self-Defense cares about. And you're also meeting people who can be friends and support system for you. I know through these past 4 years, it's been pretty divisive. So having just a place where you can find other people who are very different from you in a lot of ways, but this is the one thing that we all really care about and we can support each other on.
Dr. Stephanie Sir, welcome to the Dr. Tyna Show. I am so happy to have you here. You are my friend from Children's Health Defense Oregon. We're both on the board, and you are so active here politically. I had no idea how much work you were doing until this last year when I got to know you better. And I just am so impressed. And what I wanted to do today was bring you on the show because I think that most Americans have no idea what to do. I think many of us feel like we don't agree with what's happening in the government. We don't agree potentially what's happening even in our communities, in our state, at the state level. And we have no idea what our legislators are doing. We have no idea what the politicians are doing. And we have no idea what kind of power or impact or participation that we can have in the whole system. And that, I think, is such an important conversation to have. And while this is going to be more specific to Oregon, I want the information to be broad enough for the U.S. at large. So welcome to the show. Will you introduce yourself quickly?
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Such a pleasure to be here. So I'm Stephanie Sir. I'm an integrative veterinarian. I've been practicing for just a little bit over 20 years. I practiced in California for a while, and then I've moved here to Oregon about 3.5 years ago. And most of my career, I've been integrative, so interested in acupuncture, where I became certified. I do homeopathy and nutrition and Chinese medicine, and really try to create the healthiest pets that we can have, as few pharmaceuticals, but when they're necessary, they're necessary. And that's kind of been my approach. Like, let's see how healthy we can be and try to be responsible for ourselves and our own pets. So I try to teach my clients how to take care of their animals so that they don't have to rely on me all the time. Because as you know, doctor in Latin means teacher. And so
Yes.
I really take that seriously. And I don't want you to have to, for me to keep secrets so that you just have to keep coming back to me. I really want to share all that information. And that's sort of my perspective when it comes to children's self-defense and being active in politics as well. I want to teach everybody what I so painstakingly learned over the years so that we can all be confident and effective activists for the things that are important to us. And it may not be the same things that are important to me, and that's okay. We have to have people working in all sects of what's important so we can have a great community. So thank you again for having me.
Yeah. I remember meeting you at the Children's Health Defense event in Ashland, Oregon. You guys invited me to speak, and I met with you down in the green room, and I was like, oh my gosh, she gets it. She's a veterinarian. And I have to say that the last 4 years, it's been my friends who are veterinarians that really were probably the most agreeable with what my stance was on things, because they were like, what are the humans doing?
Right.
We understand how these things work, and yet what are the humans doing? And it's been really interesting. Anyway, you and I got along really well, and then you guys invited me onto the board, which I'm so honored to be a part of. And something I do not understand is how any of the politics works. And last year we had a bunch of bills come forth, and then I realized later you had written them and you had put them into play, and I had no idea that this was even an option. Like, I didn't know people could do that. I mean, I quite literally, most of the things you do, I didn't know were possible. I have no idea how to do. I fully admit complete ignorance when it comes to politics. It was something I, unfortunately, like a lot of Americans, ignored completely during the past many years, and to the point of barely getting through civics class and not paying. And I don't even think they have civics class anymore, but
Probably not.
it really hit me in 2020. I thought, damn, of all things, I wish right now I was a constitutional lawyer. I mean, that would have been a preferred angle to have during the past few years. And so as things have, I feel like things have really escalated on the timeline, meaning the craziness that has ensued has just ramped up. And it's almost, we got thrust into what we got thrust into in 2020. And around here in Oregon, you and I know it was craziness. And you were in California, so you like the whole West Coast nonsense. But I feel like it's sped up. I feel like they keep throwing things at us, hoping we won't notice. And in the meantime, it's, to be totally honest with you, and from what I've heard from others, it's paralyzing.
Yeah.
I don't know what to make of it. I don't know what to do. I feel powerless against
Mhm.
my own government. This is supposed to be, we the people, for the people. The government's supposed to be working for us. We pay their salary. And yet here we are feeling like sitting ducks. So hopefully over the next hour, we can go through some of these high points and really figure out how we can empower ourselves and make an impact.
Agreed, 100%. Yes, it's become, like you said, our lives are so busy, and maybe some of that is purposeful. It used to be where you could raise a family with one income and you could have a car and a home and take a vacation and someone at home to watch over the kids and what's going on in the schools and what's coming across at the school board meetings or the town hall meetings. And you really could have an eye on everything. And now it's almost impossible because there are so many bills coming so fast. And one of the things I will say that is good in Oregon is that we have some shorter legislative sessions. So it gives us a little time to breathe. Whereas some states like California, they go almost 365 days a year. So it is really quite a marathon when it comes to some of those states. So I guess we're a little lucky in that one little way.
And you said something off the air before we started recording. Politicians, we've kind of got them up on this pedestal and they're untouchable and we're intimidated by them. But it's supposed to, like you said, it's supposed to be like the local farmer who, and when I read about the history of the town I live in, Amity, Oregon, that's how it was.
Yep.
Like, the people, and it still is to some degree, the people who own big parcels of land, who've been here for generations, the people who started it, those family names are still here. Those people are active. And I mean, that's how communities are supposed to be ran. And I feel like we've completely lost touch with that. And if I were to walk up to a politician, I don't know what they do. I
Yeah.
don't know what to say to them. I don't know how to, like, do I go take them to lunch?
Yeah, so you're right. It's supposed to be someone from the community that and has been a part of the community and is someone that you feel like is approachable. And it's become this like, oh, they're a senator or oh, they're a representative and I can't talk to them and they are so, untouchable. And really, it's not supposed to be that way. So a lot of them are still, at least in Oregon, they do have another job. Their main source of income is something else. So that's still true here. Places like California and New York, it's not necessarily true at all. They are full-time legislators, and that's definitely true when it comes to federal legislators. They have no other job than to be your congressperson, which I think is unfortunate because it does set them up to be untouchable and to feel out of touch with the community because they spend so little time there. But they are just normal people who decided to get involved. Usually they start someplace like the school board and then they make their way up. And so just keep that in mind that it is your neighbor and you should be able to approach them. If they have an attitude that they're unapproachable, then let's get them out of office the next time because they really are meant to represent you. And you do pay for the building that they work in, all the staff that they have, as well as the salary that they make, which granted, it's not that much here in Oregon, but nonetheless, they are supposed to be answering to you. So,
Okay, perfect. Good to know.
yeah.
So let's just start off by talking about the general legislative process.
Okay.
The short versus long session, the House versus Senate, et cetera. I'll let you jam on this.
Okay, so here in Oregon, we have an every other year long session. So this year is an even year, so it is a short session, and that's only 6 weeks. It will start in February and end in the middle of March. It was meant to be cleaning up last year's bill. So if something went through, it didn't quite work out the way we wanted it to, it needs some amending. Let's come in for these few weeks and clean up some of these issues. Things have changed now. They do try to get bills through that are brand new and maybe even controversial because there's such a short time. People don't even hear it's happening before the session is over. So that is a downfall. And then on the odd years, we have a longer session, and that will start in February and go through June. Still not that long when you think about some of the other states that are going almost year round. But every other year, long versus short. So that's kind of how Oregon works. A lot of states are like that too, where they maybe even go every 2 years. I think Nevada, if I remember correctly, meets every 2 years, which is nice. It gives you time in between to kind of rev up, see what's going on, get ready for what's coming, and relax and rest in between. Okay, so the next would be House versus Senate. So here in Oregon, we have House of Representatives, and then we have the Senate. The two together make up our legislature. Senate is considered a little bit higher up because usually you start in the House of Representatives. It's a 2-year elected stint, and every 2 years you have to re-up. And when you go to the Senate, it's every 4 years. So there's less senators and more representatives. So representatives have a smaller number of constituents. They represent a smaller area, whereas a Senate is going to be a little bit bigger on the map. So that's the difference between House and Senate.
So I saw, am I wrong? In Oregon, we have senators for each district?
Yes, and districts are, you can look them up online to see which district you are in, and it's by zip code. So where you live is a district. The way it's supposed to be cut up is that people in the district kind of represent the same things. Like, think of Eastern Oregon. That tends to be more rural. It tends to be, a little slower paced, maybe a little bit more conservative. You head towards Portland, Multnomah County, that district tends to be more urban. The people might be a little bit more on the progressive liberal side. And so you definitely want someone representing you and people who are like you so that you can have a voice. Whereas if you're kind of the outlier in the middle of this other area, you're going to feel like there's nobody here to represent me. So they're supposed to cut up the districts to kind of represent both how people feel politically as well as kind of geographically. Things have gone a little wonky when it comes to that. There's been some problems with that. The Secretary of State's had to get involved, but nonetheless, that's the way districts are divided. So it's population and geographically.
Okay. And is there state senators as well?
Yes, and those are going to represent you in Washington, D.C. So
Okay.
those are also by district, and every district has a number, and all of them are different. So you're going to have a different district number for your Congress people, your House of Representatives, and your senators. So you will have 4 different districts that you are in. So you're going to have your U.S. senator, your U.S. representative, your state senator, and your state representative. So those are your 4 districts and your 4 representatives.
Okay. That's super helpful.
Okay.
That makes a lot more sense to me because, people who know what they're doing, they'll start talking and that it sounds like jargon to me. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we're going to, at the end, talk about how to look up your elected official. And let's talk about the Capitol location. I don't even know, what is the whole point of the Capitol and the map of the building, where to, we don't have to go into that so much for Oregon necessarily, but I don't even think people know what's happening inside that building.
Right. So the Capitol building, obviously it's Salem here in Oregon, is going to, usually it's got that big dome. Every Capitol kind of looks the same, the big dome, and you'll see 2 wings. And one wing is going to be where all the senators' offices are. And this is your state senators. And the other wing will be where all of your representatives' offices are. And then amongst those will be what are called committee hearing rooms. So say if you want to go listen to the Committee on Education, you would look up oh, okay, which room does this committee meet in? And you could go listen to all of the bills that they're hearing about education. And then there are also a room that every senator will meet in, and a room that every representative will meet in when it's something that's being decided by the entire Senate or the entire House of Representatives. And those are also located in the Capitol building. The governor's office is also located in the Capitol building. So it's the place where all of these people are, usually Monday through Thursday, sometimes on Fridays as well. Certainly if you were to set up a meeting on a Friday, they would be there. But they're supposed to come home and be with their families and do some things in their own districts, on the weekends. And they will oftentimes be home during off session time. So if they're not supposed to be reading bills, but that's it. I mean, the Capitol has all of those people in it, and all of their staffers are in there. There's even the Legislative Council, which are a bunch of lawyers that are paid for by us, the taxpayers of Oregon, who are there to help answer questions that the senators or representatives may have about the law, and also for us to go and ask questions about the law. So it's nice that we have the Legislative Council. I believe they're in the basement, which sounds kind of sad, but nonetheless, that's where they are.
And we can sit in on these committees.
We can, any one of them. And you can also now, because of technology, watch them virtually. And
Okay.
they have to let you know when they're being held. Do keep in mind, they change things often. So it's not going to be like, if you and I set a meeting, we would never dare like change it because we're professionals. But when it comes to these guys, they might go, never mind. We decided we're not going to have that meeting today. We're going to have it tomorrow instead. They do move things quite often. So it's never set in stone, which is why it's nice. The virtual stuff is kind of nice, because if you were planning on watching it and you drive all the way up to Salem and then they've postponed it, I mean, that's a huge bummer. So plus for technology.
Okay. Okay. Very cool. All right. Let's talk about lobbyists since we're talking about the roles of everyone.
Yeah.
What is a lobbyist and what do they do and how does this all work? Because I, again, have no idea.
Yeah. So a lobbyist is a professional. They have to register as a lobbyist with Oregon, and their job is to represent a group of people or an individual when it comes to either a bill or some sort of statement that you want made. So take, for example, Oregonians for Medical Freedom. They have a lobbyist and her name is Bobby. And whenever there are bills that are either for medical freedom or against medical freedom, she will go to the Capitol and talk to legislators, senators, and representatives to try to either give them information that lets them know why this bill is important and how many people support it and why they too should support it, or the opposite. How is this going to hurt us? Why do we not want to do this to your constituents? And she's got relationships in the building. These people know her, they trust her. She talks to them often. She sits in on committee hearings and gathers information so that, the rest of us know what's going on. She strategizes, like it would be important to get these people on our page. It would be important to have meetings with these people, or let these people know constituents feel this way or that way, because she really understands how the building works and how these different individuals think and what's important to them so that we can meet them where they are. And so she is paid by the Oregonians for Medical Freedom PAC to do that work for those.
Okay. So
Mhm.
lobbyists are paid.
Lobbyists are paid. However, you as an individual can decide you want to be a lobbyist. And you could also sign up and become a professional lobbyist where no one's paying you. You're just doing it for yourself. Take some time to create those relationships and be someone that people will, want to meet with and want to listen to. But certainly you can do it all on your own as well. And then there's just the activist who is acting as a lobbyist. So like if there's a bill that I think is really important, I'm technically lobbying if I'm going up to the Capitol and knocking on doors and giving information and trying to talk to these people about how I feel. That's still called lobbying, but you wouldn't be a professional lobbyist. And I believe there is a guide as far as like you can only spend 100 hours a month or something doing that on your own before you have to go register.
So you don't have to register in order to go lobby for the cause that you're
Correct.
passionate about. And when you do go to lobby, is this only during these short and long sessions or is it year round?
It's year round, so you can go anytime you want. And, those legislators may or may not be in the building. So it's always a good idea to call ahead if there's a specific person you want to talk to. But their aides and their staffers are usually there year round, just not including holidays and things like that, where you could just go knock on the door and say, hey, I know you're the chief of staff for Senator Linthicum. I would really like to share this information with you. It's important to me. Do you have 10 or 15 minutes? And usually they do, especially the staffers. They're not as busy with things that they've signed up to do. And that's usually where it starts. It's a little bit more difficult to just knock on a door and talk to a senator, but you can, it happens, definitely. But their staffers are just as important. If you can change their minds, they're going to take something to, their representative or their senator and say, hey, this is important. You really need to look at this.
Okay, so can you give a quick, and we don't have to spend too much time on it, but maybe some, 3 to 5 tips that you would give to somebody who wanted to go lobby on their own or maybe in a small group like we do. I know that Children's
Mhm.
Health Defense Board members go to Salem. I have not gone yet. I do not know what I'm supposed to do. So
Yeah.
what would you tell me if I were like, hey, you know what? I live a half an hour from Salem. I'm going.
Mhm.
What do I do?
I would say number one, dress professionally.
Of course.
Definitely. How we represent ourselves is important. Number two, make sure that you have clear talking points, and it doesn't have to be a lot. Pick 3 to 5 things that are important to you, write them down ahead of time so that you feel confident in sharing those points with them. For example, I would say health freedom is important to me, and I would pick 3 reasons why. One, bodily autonomy, my body, my choice. I think we can all agree that I should be able to choose what goes into my body and what goes into my child's body. Number two, something like my child has a right to an education. Don't you agree that every child in this state has a right to an education? In fact, the Constitution even says so. Pick some points that are kind of surface, but at the same time, really something we can all agree on. I wouldn't go in guns a-blazing with anything that somebody might consider a conspiracy theory. Really start with the facts and what's important to you, and make sure it's just 3 to 5 points that you're comfortable sharing. Um, Always be polite. I think it's very important, even if they're not treating you well, which they do. I mean, Oregon people are really nice. California is another story, but make sure you're treating them respectfully. Know who they are. I wouldn't show up and knock on a door and be like, "Well, where am I? Who is this?" Know that it says it right on the outside. This is, Representative Davis, and you just know who they are before you go in there. And if you are their constituent, meaning they are your representative or your senator, make sure you tell them that. Introduce yourself. I'm your constituent. I want to talk about these things that are important to me. Do you have a few minutes? I think that's the best place to start.
Are you able to make appointments with these folks?
And you are, yes, you could call ahead and say, I really want to speak with you. Are you available? What's a date and time where we could meet? Know that you may only be speaking with an aide or a chief of staff, and that's fine. And sometimes they'll change it on you. You thought you were meeting the representative, instead you're meeting a staffer. That's okay. You just make another meeting and make another meeting. And eventually, you'll get face to face with your representative. But yes, they are supposed to be available for meetings with you. That's their job.
Okay. This requires some tenacity.
It does.
I think something I would probably request if I were, or I should say I would like, if I were to go do something like this, I would probably want to go with somebody who knows what they're doing first. Would you suggest people just sort of maybe tag along and quietly observe for
Yeah,
a round or two?
I think it's a good idea. There are some people who are ready to go and they feel really confident about it. Maybe they've done a lot of, public speaking or have engaged with, maybe their school board or something a lot, and they're ready to go. And that's fine. If you feel like you're ready, do it. If not, it's always good to go with someone first. That's how I started. So in California, when I was fighting, some legislation for medical freedom, I started by going with people who had been doing it for a number of years, and I watched how they did it. And then I felt a lot more comfortable going, on my own. And I typically go on my own anyway. It's more fun to go with someone else, because if you forget a point and they're there to back you up to say, oh yeah, here's that statistic or here's that study, because that's what you and I would do. It's great to have that other person there, but no harm, no foul. If you feel like it didn't go well, they're still just people. We're all just human. Try again and do it next time.
You and I need to make an appointment to do this.
Okay.
Need to
Yeah.
go, we need
Yeah.
to go make it happen because I think we'd be
Okay.
a power duo. That would,
Absolutely.
that would be good. Okay. All right. So that's really helpful information. So we now know the difference between the House, the Senate, the US House, the US Senate, our state level, our district level, and then the roles of lobbyists. And then when people say, go talk to your legislators, what are legislators? Is that these people that we just
Yes,
talked
these
about?
people. Yep. So they're
Okay.
called legislators because they create legislation, which is laws. So it's your senators and your representatives. They are your legislators. Mhm.
Okay. Now, in regards to interacting with these folks, we've talked about it a bit, but tell me the benefits or, like what's more potent? What's a better use of time when we're discussing phone calls and emails,
Mhm.
town halls, sending letters? Like, what is a good strategy here for folks?
Yeah. So what we want is numbers. So they know for every one email or snail mail letter they get, that probably represents 1,000 people with the same view who just aren't taking the time or are too afraid to send in that email. So when you send in an email, there are a lot of templates out there that you can use. And I will say the click and send, they're good. We definitely want to do them. But a real email that you have taken the time to create yourself is going to get past all of the spam, bot, all that kind of stuff and get to them. And they are required by law to record every person's vote. So say if it's specifically about a bill, like I'm for this bill or I'm against this bill, they're required to tally that up and, look at it as your senator or your representative. So emails are great. If you want to send a snail mail letter, they're just as good. Phone calls, I think, are really easy as well, because typically who's going to answer the phone is going to be a staffer. And they just want to know your name, what your district is. They may ask you for your zip code because they want to make sure you are actually a constituent. And then you can just say, I want this senator to vote yes or no on this bill, and keep it short and simple. Or you may just want to say, hey, I'm just calling to remind my senator that medical freedom is important to me and I don't want mandates. You can do that over and over again. And they have to record these opinions and look at them before they go in and vote on something. So it can be scary. A lot of people start with calling after hours because there's a recorded voicemail. And then you get used to just leaving a message for your senator and nobody picks up the phone. That's where I started. I
All
was like,
right.
okay, I'm just
That's a
gonna
good
call
pointer.
after. Yep. And then it got to be where I was comfortable calling like on my lunch break. And then it was like, okay, I'll call anytime now because I'm used to it. And, Catherine Green, who's our president, she loves to call and really take these people to task. So she will spend hours and hours and hours talking to a staffer, educating them. I don't do that, but it's great if you have the time. I typically have the time for that, short and sweet. And this is how I feel, and I'm moving on. And they're always very polite. Thank you. We'll let the senator know we're taking this down. Thank you so much. They're never gonna hang up on you or say something rude because they're just really not allowed to. So don't think anyone's gonna yell or laugh at you. It's just not gonna happen. You don't know what they're thinking in their head, but that doesn't matter.
No, that's helpful to know. This is good guidance. A couple times I submitted messages through a portal on a legislator's website.
Right.
And often it would take months before I'd even get a response back. Are they required to respond to you to let you know that they received it? And is that normal that it takes that long?
They're not required to let you know they received it. Some of them do, some of them don't. And it can take a long time, especially if you go that route, which is why a phone call or an email that's separate just to their email address can be faster. But
Okay.
some of those, it'll even be 2 weeks sometimes before they respond to me. Thank you for that email, especially if you're a constituent. So one point I want to make about the being a constituent and not is that if you are calling a committee, like say the Committee on Health is meeting and the members on that committee are not your elected representative, at that moment in time, they are representing you because they are the ones who will be voting on this bill in that committee. So I will call those people and I usually tell that to the staffer or I write it in an email like, I know that I am not in Senator so-and-so's district, but right now, as the chair of the health committee, you're representing all of Oregon, which means you are representing me. And I want you to know this is how I feel. So don't let them strong arm you because they'll try, oh, you're not a constituent of his, so we don't care what you say. Oh, no, no, no. Right now, because my representative is not on that committee, you are representing me. And then they kind of shut up about it and go, okay, you're right.
That's really helpful. How
Mhm.
would you suggest people start? Is there a way that we can, and would it be important and prudent to start with knowing who everybody is in your you said 4 districts?
Yep.
So knowing who everyone is and perhaps reaching a hand out to those people specifically to start, you
Yes,
know,
I would say that's the best way to start. Yeah, just
okay.
look up who is your state senator, your state representative, your federal senator, and your federal representative. Know who they are. And I don't have my district numbers memorized, and I do this a lot, but just knowing who those 4 people are, and then maybe sending an email about something that's important to you. Like, hi, Senator. So Senator Knope is my senator. Senator Knope, I'm a constituent. I haven't been active before. I just want you to know that medical freedom is really important to me, and I would hope that you would support that. And, just leave it there as an introduction. Look on their websites, because they all have a website that will tell you a little bit about who they are, so that where do they come from, what things are important to them. So when you do connect with them, you have an ask. You always have an ask. Like, my ask is you to support medical freedom, but then you also want to give them, they work hard, give them a compliment. Like, I know that, you think that X, Y, and Z is very important. And thank you for that. Thank you for your hard work for keeping our water clean, or keeping our air clean, or whatever it might be that they do, so that they also know you're not just using them, you're interested in what they do as well. And on that website, they should have when their town halls are. Town hall could be virtual, or it could be in person, or a combination. And that's where they're meeting in your area. So it's usually like, down the street at the local library or something like that. And you can go and sit and hear what they have to say, because they are responsible for educating you on what's going on at the Capitol. And then also for you to ask questions. And it's a great way to get to know them. Some of them will have little coffees where you can, sit with them, have some coffee, ask some questions. So, if you can, they're usually during the week. It's hard for working people, but if you can make one, if you can schedule far enough in advance, a little time in your day where you could just say, hey, I'm going to go meet this person and, hear what they have to say, and make sure they know your face. And then when you're coming again and again and calling again and again, they know that you're serious.
Well, this really matters too, because it's easy to paint. We just saw such a ridiculous amount of propaganda and division the past few years. And in my opinion, was very intentional. And it's easy to paint a swath. And I'm guilty of it too. It's like, oh, these people, right? And that's actually an NLP technique. It's a technique in marketing. It's a technique in neurolinguistic programming. It's them,
Them
us, and
versus us.
them. Yep.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you and I and them. That is a marketing strategy. And them are the bad guys, right? And so it's
Right.
really easy to sort of paint that picture. But when somebody comes in who's well put together, they're articulate, they're kind, you don't have to be the smartest person in the room, but you're able to speak your mind with confidence, and you bring information. I mean, I feel like so many of our representatives in Salem don't actually even, maybe potentially don't even have any idea of what's going on reading the data that you and I are
True.
reading.
True. Mhm.
And so representing well and showing up and letting them put that image in their head of like, oh, this is somebody who's actually intelligent, has something to say, and she's on
Right.
the other team.
Right.
Maybe the other
Yeah.
team isn't made up of a bunch of whack jobs.
Right. Right.
you know,
Right.
I
And
don't
you're
know.
right. I like what you just said about bringing information. I forgot that when we were talking about when you show up. It's always great to have something that you can hand them. So I used to make these little folders that were just kind of a thick blue cardboard. And then I would hole punch some, like, whether it was a study I wanted them to know, or a newspaper article that I thought was, you can trust those these days, but was pertinent. And I would put a couple things together. And after I was done, I would say, this is for you. I'd appreciate it if you would look through this. And don't put a lot in there. You don't want to show up with a binder. You want to keep it little bite-sized pieces of information, one study, one article, and then, hand it off to them so they can kind of look at that, read it, and then next time come with something more. So you're just building on that. And I know, Catherine loves to give them books, and that's great, but their chances of them reading it might be slim to none. So maybe
Right.
you're pulling out some graphs from a book, or in photocopying them, or somebody's interview with a link that you think they'd be interested in. But such a great point, Tina, that you want to have something that you can leave behind so they remember you.
And an easy way to do this, which seems off topic, but it's not. Using Chat GPT is such a great way to truncate and organize information. And you can literally, if it's a book that's popular that's out, you can ask Chat GPT to summarize it for you,
Yeah.
and it'll give you. And then you can ask it to put it in bullet points. You can take a few key paragraphs out of a study, and you can put it into Chat GPT and ask it to bullet point it for you, or put it in a table format,
Awesome.
and it'll do it. So there's ways to get this information truncated down, because I know that's the bulk of the work, at least for me. That's what it feels like. It's like, oh my gosh, like I know by scanning this study what it says, but for
Yes.
me to sit there and put it into, really,
Layman terms. Yeah.
well, like fifth grade. And
Yep.
and that's not to disrespect any of the legislators. That's just, again, marketing 101. Like, you have to explain things in like a fifth to seventh grade level. And I
Mhm.
think that's been a key to my success online, is that I explain everything as if I were explaining it to a fifth grader.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, and that's not to, again, to discredit my audience's intelligence level. That's just the best way to get information across. And so you can ask ChatGPT to say it, like, please explain this like you're explaining it to a fifth grader. And it'll give you a nice summary. And then you can take that and print that off and
Awesome.
bring that with you. So you're not like, here, read this 80-page medical study.
Right. Yep.
They're
Just
not going
people
to
think it,
read.
right? So that they can go make sure you weren't lying. That's a beautiful idea. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And books too, like I said. So there's ways to get this information summarized and truncated and bullet pointed down, so that you can have something that you can say, hey, can you please check this out? And then maybe include the whole study so they know that you're not making it up, right? Whatever, however you
Yeah.
want to do that. But always back. I am a big fan of backing everything up with data. One of my favorite ways to argue with people is when they start with me. I'm just like, may I obliterate you with data?
Yes.
And we don't necessarily want to come off that way, because that sounds preachy and bossy and it turns people off. So
Yeah.
that's an arguing strategy, not a, trying to get somebody to actually take action. So,
Yeah.
all right. So let's talk really quickly. I think we covered this, but how to become active. Like, what are kind of I mean, we just talked about how to be active at the Capitol building, but like,
Right.
how do we do this in general in our communities with organizations?
Yeah. Well, nationally, Children's Health Defense is everywhere. It's even international. So it's in other countries. It's a great place to start. Sign up for the emails both at the national level and at your state level. So almost all, I would be guessing, but I think 36 states now have chapters. So Oregon has its own Children's Health Defense chapter, which you and I sit on the board. So signing up for your individual state emails too, because those are going to give you what's going on here in Oregon as far as things you should know about and get involved with, like bad bills, good bills, things going on with EMF, things going on, with education. And so make sure you've got both a grip on a local level and on a national level. There's also Oregonians for Medical Freedom. Sign up for their emails as well, because they also have a powerhouse and a lobbyist. And so they need lots of volunteers and lots of help as well. Children's Health Defense has, most of our counties have an ambassador here in Oregon. So there are local meetings. So like I'm in Deschutes County. We try to get together every month or so and have either a topic we're going to speak about, or maybe we have a speaker coming in who's teaching about health, and you're getting to be with members in your community. And we talk about what's going on in our county, like what are our local elected officials doing, what's happening at our school boards, what's happening down the street, things that you need to know about. And it covers a bunch of topics that Children's Health Defense cares about. And you're also meeting people who can be friends and support system for you. I know through these past, 4 years, it's been pretty divisive. So having just a place where you can find other people who are very different from you in a lot of ways, but this is the one thing that we all really care about and we can support each other on. I've made a ton of friends that way. I've met a lot of practitioners who are holistic that way, so that, you're getting like, who's the best dentist? Who's the best naturopath? Who's the chiropractor I should see? Who's like on our page? It's just a great resource and a great community. So I think those are the best ways to get involved. And we need lots of volunteers. So you can do as little or as much as you want when it comes to helping out. But the more people who are willing to be there to do some things, the more powerful we are and the bigger impact we can have.
Yes, absolutely. And don't underestimate your skill set. So if you're a graphic designer in Oregon and you want to help us, please come.
IT. Oh my God,
Yeah,
do we need social
IT,
media?
social media, tech, like maybe you're good at copywriting. Maybe you're good
Yeah,
at whatever skill set that you have. It doesn't mean you have to necessarily go man the booths or
right.
stand at tables and, deal with other people if you don't even want to. But if you can bring your particular skill set to the table and help these organizations, you really can help everybody level up. I think that's, a
Absolutely.
great way to bring your gifts to the world for a cause that matters to you
Yes.
through an organized group that has some backing behind it.
Mhm.
And it's better than getting angry and going on rants on social media by yourself. It's
Absolutely. And keep in mind, these are all volunteer, unpaid organizations. So none of us are getting paid to do this. We're all doing it because we're passionate, and people do get burned out. So the more help we have, the more we are able to continue going. And if you do have some funds and you can donate, thank you. Please do. There are costs behind this, whether it's printing out materials, paying for speakers, paying for books, taking the time to go up and, lobby does take some funds. So we would appreciate any donations that you could maybe put forward. Even if all of our members who are on our email list right now gave us $2 a month, it would fund us for a whole year. $2 a month.
wow.
That's all we need. Just a
Yeah,
recurring $2. Give up. It's not even a cup of coffee.
that would be powerful.
Yeah.
And it also keeps you abreast of what's going on. And so when nonsense starts coming down the chute, notified when it's time to rally, when it's time to organize and group up and start having conversations, So, and you're really good about keeping me and the board up to date and an Oregon chapter. And I know that the National Children's Health Defense, it does a spectacular job of really
Mhm.
staying on top of the news of what's happening.
Yeah.
So that's just, I mean, that national email that I get almost every day, I think it comes out daily. Like that's how I know what's going on.
Yeah.
And
Tender. It's amazing.
yeah, really important. So, and again, if all you can do is give money, money is great too. Any way that you can support I don't want to say the fight, but that's really what in some places that's what it's coming down to. So
Absolutely.
I was on the association for the Oregon Naturopathic Association and Doctor Association. And I left that organization so that I could come be on this board because this was way closer to my heart at the end of the day. Without medical freedom, what's the point of even being a doctor, right? So
Yeah.
I felt, and you guys are my people. And so, like you said, it helps you find your people. There's been times when I've invited followers to some of our events, and folks will come and they all say the same thing at the end. They're like, thank you so much for inviting me today or notifying me or whatever it was. I found my people today. I don't feel so alone. And it's been so isolating. And I think, again, that was partially intentional. And it's been a lonely few years for a lot of people who are maybe they've lost their entire family through
Mhm.
this
Mhm.
saga and they've lost all their friends and they've lost their jobs and and they're feeling alone. There are other people. And again, I think you and I are old enough to remember when politically I used to sit around with Republican friends,
Yeah.
Democrat friends,
Independent.
I mean, I used to have employees that were like far left wing. I had employees that were super conservative. Everybody got along in the office. Everybody
Everybody.
was there for, and we could have
Yes.
conversations that were intellectual and we could challenge each other. And it always made you think a little harder.
Mhm.
And being open to someone else's perspective, whether or not you agree with it or not, is not the point. And I feel like we've all just gotten on our teams
Yeah.
and we're losing. And I know that, RFK talks about this a lot and the team thing, this has got to go away. And so being a part of an organization where, you might be in there with people of different ages, different
Mhm.
backgrounds, different
Mhm.
beliefs on some other fundamental issues. But we're,
100%.
like you said, we're in the one thing that matters to us, the fight.
Yeah. And we have to be able to disagree because that's how science works. You have to have someone challenge you, you have to disagree, and you still have to be okay with, well, that's not how I think that works, or that's not what I think about that topic, but we agree on this and let's work together so that we can maintain this fundamental right to choose what goes into our bodies. Whether you believe in border control or you don't, or you think none of that matters. If, like you said, if we aren't free to choose what goes into our body, none of the rest of it matters. So let's just all come together on what we agree on. And I remember 100% exactly what you're talking about. In college, I remember I had some friends who were so conservative when it came, to financial things. And I was always just fascinated by, well, why do they think that? And where does that
Yeah.
come from? And I was always just curious, and that curiosity and, exchanging ideas definitely, helped me to decide what I actually believed versus what I had read or what my family believed. And that's, I think, how we learn and grow. And some of those people are still to this day some of my closest friends, and we disagree on things and we laugh about it. It's just totally fine. And that's how
It's
we need
totally
that again.
fine.
just like RFK says, heal the divide. We have to come together or they
Right.
win.
I do think I will say, as someone who grew up in Portland, very liberal city with very conservative parents, I was always sort of right in the middle. And it's really hard to be a moderate and sit and look at both sides. And my husband and I tease each other because we will watch some extreme content from both sides and we'll be like,
Yeah.
did you hear this? And
Both sides. Yes.
and it's hard. It's hard to sometimes sit down and listen to it. But all that to say is just an exposure issue. That's why travel's so awesome, right? Like the more that we can be exposed to different people, find common ground, that's how humans are meant to function and thrive. It's not.
Absolutely. Yes. I'm like you. I grew up in the California Bay Area, which my cousin calls, a Benetton catalog. She's like, Steph, not everybody grew up in a Benetton catalog like you. They weren't exposed to all these cultures and different ways of thinking. And it was a blessing, I think, but I also recognize that people who didn't have that exposure, again, it doesn't mean like what you said. They're not a racist. They're not a bigot. They're not a whatever phobe. They just need to be exposed to it. Most humans are really good and most humans are really accepting. And I feel like it's a propaganda thing to make us feel that we're not. And I'm just really not for that. We will all come together when given the opportunity. We will help each other. We will support each other. We will do the right thing when given the opportunity.
Absolutely. And it goes both ways. I now live in a rural conservative community of farmers and Christian farmers. And when I met my husband, I was like, honestly, I thought all the folks from out here were just a bunch of hicks. And I didn't know what that meant. I mean, full disclosure, I was just like
Yeah.
the snobby urban girl who had not ever been around just salt of the earth folks who worked their land. And, it's
Love
just
the land.
exposure, right? Like being in this community has completely changed my mind about so many things that I just had been really flippant about because I was like, oh, I grew up in the suburbs in the city. And so again, just the more exposure that we can have to different walks of life, I think is the critical factor here.
So true. Because I think I've told you this, my husband is Hawaiian. And we were looking at places to move. I was like, well, maybe we should go to Idaho. I feel like they're pretty solid medical freedom. And he was like, no, don't you know there are white supremacists there and they won't like me. And I was like, really? Oh, no idea. And we went, like after we moved to Oregon already, we went on vacation there because it was one of the only places open during COVID. And he was like, oh, they got me. The propaganda. They got me. They're not here. They're not like that. And it makes you realize we're all susceptible to that sort of propaganda and playing on our fears and our lack of exposure and our lack of knowledge. It's very true. Travel
You make such a good point. It comes from fear because he was afraid they wouldn't like him or that they would be racist against him.
Yeah.
I was afraid that the folks out here, when I moved out here, honest to God, I was scared. I was like, I think the folks out here are going to think I'm just a dumb suburban girl. And treat me as such. Like treat me as like a bougie city girl who doesn't know anything. And that's where it all stems from fear. At the end of the day, I don't know, whatever it is that they're playing on the fear. And I have to check myself and be like, am I coming from a place of authenticity or am I coming from a place of fear? And usually it's do things that scare you, right? Go get exposure to things that might formerly have frightened you. And you will see that humans are pretty awesome at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Okay. So just for the folks, this part's going to be more Oregon specific, and then we'll wrap it up. But every state has a legislative information system. Is that correct?
Right. Yes. And ours here in Oregon is called OLIS legislature.gov. And if you go to that website, you can do a number of things. And this is going to be true for every state. You're going to be able to go to that website and look up by your address who your legislators are. Who's your representative and who's your senator in that state. And you're also going to be able to look up every bill that's coming through that session and every committee, what they're hearing and when they are meeting. So that website is something that you should find and familiarize yourself with and make sure that you know exactly where you need to look. I'm happy to share my screen if you'd like and show you what Oregon's look like. if you want me to. So this is ours for finding your legislator. And it's www.oregonlegislature.gov. And if you go right here where it says find your district and legislators, it needs your whole address. I'm going to put mine in, but once you put that in there and you hit go, it will tell you who your representative is and who your senator is. And then on that same place, this one here that says OLIS is where you can click, and it will take you to looking at, move our faces down, to bills. I think this is the most next important thing. So if you know the bill number, if you're like, oh, I heard that SB 254 is really bad, you can put that in. I don't know if there's an actual 254, and then hit go, and no results found. But if there were one, you could click on it, open it up, read what it's about, and then also see where it's moving. You know, which committee is it going to be in? When are there dates where you could write in and say you support it or you don't, or dates you could, show up and call in and give your support. So really quickly, I think those are the two most important things to know about that website is how to find your legislator and how to find bills. And typically, if you're more novice at this, you're going to be hearing from like our email, like there's this bill that's great, or there's this bill that's bad, and you can go put the number in and track it.
Okay. Now, quickly, I know that in Oregon, and maybe it's Oregon Medical Freedom Group, or Oregonians for Medical Freedom, they track the bills, don't they? Don't they have a website where they kind of keep you abreast of what's happening?
Yes. And that is going to be uniteoregonnow.com. And when there are bills that we think are important for medical freedom, you can come to this website, how to follow bills. And this is actually kind of a cool thing if you wanted to do it. Nicole DeGraff here will actually walk you through on these little videos exactly how to receive emails about that bill from Oregon legislature themselves. So
cool.
I recommend going through there and signing up. So I actually get emails when there's a bill I'm watching telling me that it's moving so that I don't even have to keep checking myself. And that's through this little process here. So I would watch Nicole tell you how to do that. And again, that Unite Oregon Now, and this is the home page.
Okay,
here.
we'll put all the links in the show notes.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's very helpful. Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me about Legislation 101 that's coming up, because this podcast is going to come out right before that. So anybody who wants to get active, this is the part to listen to.
Yeah, so this is an in-person training. People from CHD, myself included, people from Oregonians for Medical Freedom, we are going to be in Salem giving tours to anybody who wants to get familiar with the Capitol so that you walk in there and know where you're going and feel really good about it. So we're meeting in Salem at 10:30 at a place called Ike Box. It's just a couple blocks away from the Capitol because the Capitol is under construction right now. So a lot of the places we used to meet like inside the Capitol are closed down. So we're going to meet there. There's an 11 a.m. tour and then a 1 p.m. tour. So show up and we're going to have bullet points both from Oregonians for Medical Freedom and from CHD that talk about the things that are important to people in our community that you can take with you if you want to give them to legislators or just take home with you to think about. But those two tours, we're going to take you straight through. Here's where the committee meetings happen. Here's where the senator's offices are. Here's where the House of Representative offices are. Here is what we call the Senate floor and the House floor, where the entire group meets to vote on a bill. And here's the governor's office. And then, we're going to pop our heads in with some friendly legislators and say hi so that you guys can meet some of our medical freedom friendly people and just get to feel how comfortable you should be, how approachable these people really are. So it's really just the beginning of training on how do I go to the Capitol and what would lobbying look like. We welcome you to make meetings with your representatives. If you can get a meeting that day, first come, first serve, we'll be happy to show up with you and you can watch how we do it, or we can just support you if you want to talk to them for those 15 minutes, 30 minutes tops is typically the length of a meeting. So know that you've got to have your bullet points ready to go, but it's really meant to just familiarize you and make it less scary to go to the Capitol and engage with your representatives.
I
And
love
that's
that.
February 9th, if I didn't say February 9th.
February 9th. And then those meetings, they should schedule after the 1 p.m. tour because you guys are going to be busy that whole first part of the morning. So it should
Exactly.
be afternoon.
Yes. And you do have to make those calls ahead of time. So start calling
Yes.
now if you want an appointment on that day. You're probably not going to get a last minute meeting with one of your representatives.
Okay. I will not be there. I'm going to be in Hawaii for my 50th birthday. So
Yeah.
I will send you all good strength and good vibes.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. I need to go dry out a little bit. Well, this has been so helpful, honestly. And I hope that all the listeners got a lot out of it as well, because this pertains to your state. And this was basically a quick civics lesson from
Yes.
Stephanie Sir. Really, really helpful, really important to get involved. Again, educate yourself, keep yourself abreast, try to find your community, try to find organizations that are doing some of this work for you so that you can, like she just showed the website where everything was already listed. There are people, there are boots on the ground doing the work. Get involved and support them however you can with your talents or your finances or your time.
Yes. Yes, please. 100%. Thank you, Dr. Tina. That was great. And I'm so glad that it was helpful. And I'm so glad that you were able to do this with me because you are such a powerhouse and you reach so far. And I think that you have the power to educate so many. So I really, really appreciate you.
Thank you, lady. You're going to have to take me to Salem and show me how to do it.
I will. You got it. It's a date.
All right. All right. Everybody listening to the show, if you enjoyed this episode, I'd love to hear back from you. You can email us at podcast@drtina.com, and please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast player. It really helps get the word out. I'm just trying to help people gear up for what is coming. Like Stephanie mentioned, there are a few battles I think that are coming, and we need to know what we're doing this next round, and we need to be more organized. So with that, I will bid you adieu. Thank you for listening to the show, and we'll be back next week.